Hey everyone, I'm Captain V, and this is Snakes and Bats in a Vietnam War Cave. Okay, this story takes place on my wife's and my Asia trip about, I don't know, 6 years ago, something like that. And we were in Vietnam for this one, obviously. We've gotten down to a place called Hue, and we were checking out some tunnels and things like that left over from the Vietnam War. Now kind of like a museum-like exhibit. But some of it was indoors and some of it was outdoors. So first we went down into tunnels like this. And believe it or not, these are about 20, 30 feet underground, a pretty decent ways underground, and a whole big elaborate system of tunnels um, that fighters had used in order to go across the battlefield. And um, in here, believe it or not, these were the tourist tunnels. These ones had been dug out to be big enough for tourists to be able to fit into and look around in. And already we had to be kind of hunching over like this in order to do that. Now, after a while of going through these tunnels, we were walking around outside, and the guide with us, there's about a group of 20 of us, tourists, and the guide said, okay, who um who thinks they could do the real thing? And we're like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, come over here, take a look. And they had preserved a tunnel that was the real size of what the tunnels were like back then, not dug out to be bigger for tourists to fit in. They were the real small size from back during the Vietnam War. This tunnel had been left alone, and it was just maintained to keep its original size. So all we could see was this pit, this hole just big enough to fit into, and it went down about 6 feet, and then it curved into like a tunnel sideways. And he's like, okay, who's brave enough to go in? And I looked around, and people were kind of like, who knows what's down there? There were no lights. And he's like, anybody? And finally, I'm like, sure, how bad can it be? So I volunteer. And he goes, all right, come on up. Here you go. And this was my only piece of safety equipment. He gives me his cell phone. And he says, here you go. He turns on the flashlight function. He goes, there's your flashlight. So when you get under the ground, go that way and then stay left. Stay left if you want to stay in Vietnam. We're like, what? Like, hmm, okay. Okay, it should be fine. So obviously, easy direction, stay left. And I don't know how far it's going to be. I just stay in left until I find an opening. So in I go. And I can barely get down into size, like get down into this hole. There's just enough space for me to get down and get myself down onto the ground. Now, immediately, it goes from being standing room into crouching. And then two steps later, it's down into on my hands and knees. And two steps, like two crawls later, I'm on my belly. It's only this high. Okay. It's just high enough for me to be like this now, leopard crawling. That is on my belly, on the ground. And I can just do this to pull myself forward. And I'm using my toes to kick myself forward too. It's that narrow down there. So I start going, and I start to realize, I don't really like the ground here because it's all like loose leaves, dry leaves that had fallen in there. And then it was about this thick of leaves. And if you know Vietnam, you know there are a lot of, let's say, interesting animals out there that can hurt you, like snakes or spiders or lots of things. And I have no idea, like any number of those things could be hiding in the leaves down there. And there's no way of avoiding them. I'm crunching over top of every leaf as my elbows are hitting the sides like this. And I'm crawling forwards like this in the darkness. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I look back, and now some other guy has joined me, and he's plopped down behind me. And he's like, why are you stopping? Keep going. He's freaked out too. And I'm like, oh, okay. So there's no going back. We can't go backwards. It's just, you just get jammed up. So I got to go for it. So I start crawling, and I'm crawling like this. And I just have this little phone out and with a flashlight like this. It's just that really hazy kind of white light from a cell phone. And I'm like, moving forwards. And then after a minute, like there's a branch and I go left, and there's another branch and I go left, and I'm looking up like this, and what do I see? There are these things about this big, and they're on the ceiling. And I get closer and closer. I'm like, there's something up here. And he's like, well, we have to go that way, so keep going. So I'm like, what is it? And I get closer and closer with the light, and they're bats. There are bats hanging from the ceiling in this tunnel. And the tunnel's only, this big. So there's no way to avoid these things. So I'm like, go bat, go. And I try to like wave the light to disturb these bats to get them out of here. I don't want to hit them like with my head. I don't want them to bite me, right? There can be rabies in bats. And so I'm like, yeah, go bats, go. I try to freak them out. They're not moving. They're like fast asleep or something. So I have to go up and I have to hit the bats with the phone. So I'm crawling and eventually I start going like, and each one I have to hit the bat off of the top, and then it freaks out and it goes flap, 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 all around in front of me. I'm like, and it goes all around, and then finally it goes off that way, away from the light that way. And I have to keep doing this, go like a little bit more, whack back, a little bit more, whack back, and off it goes. And I'm just like, as I work my way down this tunnel like this, and there are no lights like this, right? It's all just pitch black and this light. And the guy back behind me is just pushing me the whole time. Finally, after minutes of this, I'm just plowing through, hoping that there'd be no scorpion, that be no spider, no poisonous spider, no poisonous snake or anything in the leaves beneath me, and hitting off the bats above me. Finally, I see a little bit of sliver of light at the end of this one tunnel after another branch. And we get over there and I get up and out of there. And I get up out of there. The guy after behind me gets out and we're both like ghostly pale, like this light right now. And my wife says to me, how was that? And I just said, I don't want to talk about it. No, it was scary. Not a recommended list of mine. Yeah. So if you go to Hawaii, don't volunteer to go in the real tunnel. All right. Hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you next time.